Between client meetings, managing your business, and everyday tasks, who has time to worry about website hosting? With Kinsta's managed WordPress hosting, you don't have to. They handle the technical stuff, delivering lightning-fast load times, enterprise-grade security, and 24/7 365 human-only support. Simply switching to Kinsta could make your site up to 200% faster. Kinsta's custom dashboard makes managing sites easy, with powerful features designed to save you time and effort. Plus, their free expert-led migrations ensure a smooth transition. Ready to see why Kinsta is trusted by thousands of businesses? Get your first month free at kinsta.com. That's KINSTA.com. Kinsta. Simply better hosting.
Are you feeling overwhelmed by hormonal changes? If you're a woman, you're not alone. With over 1,000 hormone disruptors in our environment, it's no wonder things can feel out of balance. On top of that, natural changes like PMS, menopause, and other life stages can leave you feeling tired, irritable, and trapped in a constant battle with your body. But here's the good news. You don't have to suffer through it. Hormone Harmony by Happy Mammoth is here to help. This herbal formula fine-tunes your hormones, balancing estrogen, testosterone, and even stress hormones like cortisol, which can contribute to weight gain, racing thoughts, poor sleep, and more. With over 40,000 five-star reviews and a bottle selling every 24 seconds, the results speak for themselves. Ready to feel like yourself again? For a limited time, get 15% off your first order at happymammoth.com using code NEXTCHAPTER at checkout. Visit happymammoth.com today and get your old self back naturally.
Coming up on episode 312 of Wheel Bearings, we've got the Honda Pilot Trailsport, the Mercedes-AMG EQE SUV, the Mazda CX-90 plug-in hybrid, the Mazda CX-30 Turbo, and several new vehicles from the Monterey Car Week, including the Acura ZDX, the Mustang GTD, and the Lamborghini Lanzador. All that and more coming up next. This is episode 312 of Wheel Bearings. I'm Sam McWell-Salmon from Guidehouse Insights.
And I'm Nicole Wakeland from The Road Reflected.
And I'm Stephanie Brinley from S&P Global Mobility.
And thank you for joining us again, Steph. Robbie is off gallivanting among the fancy people in Monterey this weekend. And I think he also had a gig with his Devo band last night.
He had a lot. He's a busy man this weekend.
That's busy. Well, I'm sorry he's not here, but thank you for bringing me in again.
Thanks for joining us again. So, Nicole, let's start with you. What have you been driving this week?
I have been driving and I'm going to read the whole title because I love it when the title of a car sounds like a small book. It's the 2023 Mazda CX-30 2.5 turbo all-wheel drive with Premium Plus package. So very that's nice. What I'm driving this week. So it says it's a crossover, a small little crossover kind of thing. It has a 2.5 liter with 227 horsepower, 310 pound-feet of torque. So it's enough that it moves. You know, this isn't a huge vehicle. And Mazdas are peppy little cars. It's a little turbocharged thing. So it's fun to drive around. I got to drive it back and forth into the city a couple times, took a little bit of drive out into the middle of nowhere for kicks and giggles. And it's a fun car. And I like, Mazdas tend to handle pretty well. You know, you take it on a twisty road and they don't ever feel quite as big as they are. They handle like a little bit of a smaller vehicle. So even though this is a crossover, it's got a little bit more of a sedan vibe to it because it's on twisty turning side roads, it's very planted. It's very fun. It's very easy. You have like no body roll. I enjoy driving Mazdas. I'm generally speaking a Mazda fan and I like this one. I think it's got the Mazda interior. The only thing, so I discovered a thing. I'm going to be cleaning the Mazda when I finish the podcast. So it's been pouring rain all summer in New Hampshire. Like we've had 2 days of sun and it's been dumping. And I ordered myself a Starbucks. And when I rolled the window down to order the Starbucks, the skies decided that was the moment to open. And when I say it was raining, it was like coming sideways. My left side is soaked as I get to the window. In the 2 minutes it took me to order 3 Starbucks coffees. And it's all over the door because it's wet because you have to open the window. And I wiped it off with my hand. This was a couple days ago. So it's like the normal kind of thing you do in your car. Like you're using your sleeve, to kind of sop up some of the water on the side. And I'm like, okay, go about my business. I looked at it this morning. Apparently, it did not like that water more than I thought it did. And I can see little watermarks on it. And I'm like, and I was rubbing at it and it comes off, but I like literally am going to have to rub, like get like a little cloth and like polish so it does come off, but I was really surprised. I'm like, it was just water from right from the sky. It didn't even drip off of the car, directly from the sky, sideways into the vehicle. And I was kind of surprised, like, because you live someplace where there's snow and rain, especially in the winter, you roll down your window and if there's snow, some of it's getting in the car. So yeah, the interior is a little bit sensitive to moisture. How's that? So it will come off and I'm like, I'm gonna have to buff this out. But otherwise it's a nice little interior. There's good storage in this one. I like that there was plenty of room in front. Like there's a little pod where it will fit your iPhone and like a wallet. And then when you move the center console, the cover for it, it has two little dividers in there. And the lid slides. Like you can slide it back if you want to, and it slides forward. It's all about the small things this week. The only thing is if you've slid it back and you try to close it, it does not like that. It needs to be slid forward, then closed, then you can slide it back. So if you've managed to somehow open and slide, when you go to close it, you slam it like 8 times and get really mad. And then you're like, what is going on? You slide it forward with the lid slightly open, and then you close it and then you slide it back. I'm like slamming it. I'm like, what am I doing wrong? It's just a lid.
It's just a lid.
It's just a lid.
But it's those little details that annoy people.
Right. Mm-hmm. And it should be and then I thought, no, it's just me. I'm being silly. Anybody who had this would not have this problem. And then my daughter opened it up
the first
something. Time. Yeah. Right. Then she did it. And she's like, what is up with this? I'm like, you got to slide forward with the lid open now. Yep. Mm-hmm. Close it. Now you can slide it back. She's like, this is stupid. I'm like, I don't have to tell me. So it's little things, the things that drive you mad. But otherwise, I mean, I like riding in this. It's a comfortable car. It's fun to drive. The room in it was actually pretty good. So Russ people know is like 6'3", and he does the standard, I think of it as the guy thing. You immediately throw the seat back as far as it will possibly go and then recline it. And when my daughter first got in behind him, she's like, yo, Dad, like she's her knees. But all he had to do was really just like no longer be like reclining, just bring the seat up a little bit. So he wasn't quite so far back. And there was plenty of room for her, and she's 21, they're adults. So there was enough room for her to be comfortable behind the 6-foot guy who wanted to have the entire right-hand side of the car to himself. So that worked out okay. And it's, got a decent little amount of cargo room. So I liked it. So I had a fun week driving around in the zippy little CX-30 and pricing. I think that, I don't think this is outrageous because the interior is really nice. It's a nicely appointed, I always think Mazda interiors look a little bit better than what their price is. Look like you spent a few more bucks than you actually do. And this one's no exception. So the total with all the things is $37,405. You guys want to guess at destination? Stephanie, do you do this the other times you're on the show? We guess to see who comes closest on destination, like a Price is Right thing. You got to throw out a number. What do you think the delivery, processing, and handling fee was for the Mazda CX-30?
Yeah, I'm not going to cheat and look at the Mazda.
Don't look. No cheating. No cheating, Stephanie.
And it might not be the same anyway.
And it might not be the same.
Right. So,
but no, I'll guess 1095.
Okay, Sam. Sam is really good at this. Actually, it's really just that I'm really bad at it, but go, Sam.
I'll say 995.
Oh, Stephanie wins. It's 1275.
Oh, more than that.
Oh, see, I almost said 1230.
See, you win. It's the closest without going over.
It's that
1275. So yeah, so this, and I mean, it's for that price. There's leather seats, there's power driver's seat, you got heated front seats, like you've got heated steering wheel. I mean, it has all the sort of little bells and whistles that you would want. It feels like a premium vehicle. And I feel like for $37,400 and the drive, all that combined, it's not the cheapest one you can buy, but it is a heck of a lot of fun to drive.
Yeah, but go ahead, Steph.
At that price point, it is the top of the top, right? Mm-hmm. And it's the engine. And really that engine kind of does make that car. Mm-hmm. The other engine is a little difficult. So yeah, it's at 37. It's expensive at that point, but that's everything that you can do. There's not another point past that. And right. To your point, you can get the vehicle less expensive if you want to give up some creature comforts.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was actually just, my daughter's thinking about buying a CX-30 right now.
Oh.
And so, we were talking about the pricing, and you can get them starting, I think it's like 27.5, something like that. It's under 28,000, not including the delivery charge. So you can get it quite reasonably priced. And, it comes standard with all-wheel drive. So it's including all-wheel drive at that price point. And, if you compare it to competitors, at that same price point, especially you look at the interior, it does look and feel a lot more premium than a Ford Escape or a RAV4 or a CRV at the same price point. So, if that's something you're interested in, I mean, the CX-30 compared to those is slightly smaller. The CX-5 is more the direct competitor to those, but even the CX-5, at the same price point also feels more premium. But I think, I really like it. And as you said, Steph, I really like it with that turbo engine. It's kind of got a little bit of the character of the old Mazda Speed 3, but without the torque steer, because you got all-wheel drive now, and unfortunately without a manual too. But
and they have some great colors.
Yeah.
Mine is not super exciting. This is machine gray metallic, but the interior. Really? I guess it is. The interior, though, is actually kind of cool. The interior is white and brown, so it's like this chocolate, the chocolate brown kind of color in the dash and the wonkety center console, but the seats are white. And they're not like a bright white. My mom would have called it winter white. Like it's slightly light. It's not cream, but it's not that bright white, which I think is actually better, because I feel like truly a white interior is really hard to live with, especially, and I've yet to see when it doesn't matter whether it's a cheap car or an expensive car. The dye from blue jeans is murder on white seats. You always see it. And we're in cars that we don't drive. It's not like these cars have 50,000 miles on it. Sometimes we're getting in a car that's only had someone's butt in that seat for 2,500 miles. And you can look at it and go, yep, somebody had a new pair of blue jeans, because you can see the hint of the blue dye on the seat. I feel like that would be a little less noticeable when the white isn't quite so bright to begin with. So it's a little bit more muted. So I like this interior. It's pretty.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, Steph, what have you been driving?
Well, it's a split week. So I had one for part of a week and one that I've had less time with. And I've probably actually spent less time in the CX-90. But I had the 2024 Mazda CX-90 plug-in hybrid. It really only had just the CX-90 is the only thing that says up there. This is not a book. It's just a simple name.
That's it? No, just CX-90? Oh my gosh.
The specific model, I guess, is 2024 CX-90 PHEV Premium Plus package.
Okay. See, it's got a little bit of a mouthful.
It's got a little bit of a mouthful there. Tons of interior, tons of features, tons of interior space. It's like the inline six CX-90, right? It's the biggest 3-row that Mazda's had, and they've addressed a lot of those kinds of issues. The thing that I kind of took away from it, though, is I like the inline six better. I feel like with this PHEV, you can feel the weight of it, and it's not quite giving me enough. And it was, I think, said it had 27 miles or so range when I first got into it. And the first thing that I had to do was, take it on a 10-mile errand, 10 miles there and 10 miles back. So I'm like done with most of the electric at that point. If I struggle with plug-in hybrids in the low range that they have right now, because I feel like almost every time I have one, I'm out of EV power. And yes, I can plug it in when I get home. But when you're just talking about something that's small, it feels like a little bit of a hassle. Like if my husband's commute is only 4 miles one way, so like I feel like he could go 2 or 3 days and not really have to think about it and keep it in EV mode. But you go like out of that circle and you kind of have to think about it, or just drive it as a hybrid. And most of the time, I like plug-in hybrids better as hybrids than even their EV counterpart, their EV time, because the hybrid is usually got a little bit more power. It's more torque compared to a regular hybrid. And that's true of this one as well, but it also feels a lot heavier than the regular CX-90 does, I felt like. So I felt like it lost that weight somehow in there. The CX-90 inline six still felt like a Mazda to me. This one feels a little bit heavier and a little bit less responsive. And I'm going to blame that on battery weight, even though I don't know 100% sure that's the problem.
Well, no, I think that's pretty reasonable.
I think you're right.
The battery weighs probably somewhere around 400 pounds, and 2 extra cylinders going to add a lot less than 400 pounds.
Yeah.
So it probably is about, I think there's about a 350 pound weight difference between the 6-cylinder and the plug-in hybrid.
And you feel it, and it's got to be partly where it's placed and all of that. So I drivability was not my favorite Mazda to drive in a while. And I, like you, Nicole, I'm a Mazda fan and always have been. It always makes me a little bit sad that they make these cars that are so cute and so fun to drive, and the people just don't necessarily respond to it in the way that I think they should. They should be excited about the CX-30.
My husband, when I first started doing this job years ago, was like, "Oh, you have a Mazda." The first time I got a Mazda, and I said, "Where did that reaction come from?" Well, it's a Mazda. I'm like, "What? Why are you anti-Mazda?" And I'm like, "I don't even know where it came from." And then as I'm driving, I was like, "This is actually kind of nice." I'm like, "Yeah." And it was like this gradual, like, can I sell you on a brand that you're discounting for no discernible reason?
And they did get themselves, and they haven't been doing it for the last 5 or 6 years. They've been kind of trying to pull out of it, but they had gotten themselves more in Japan than in the US, but they had gotten themselves into a position where they were discounting too much.
Yeah.
And kind of going down that path, which never really works out very well. Because when you discount the heck out of something, consumers ultimately then they're like, well, obviously nobody wants this.
Right.
So
it's a bargain brand. It's junk. No one will buy it. Yeah.
Even the people who buy it are like, and you see it. And so it's, but they've gotten out of that. So this one was $58,920 total MSRP. So that actually is not crazy for the 3 rows and the PHEV and everything. So it's actually in the content in there. I have a black Nappa leather one with rhodium white premium exterior.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's big white.
And I mean,
if
you compare that to something like the Volvo XC90 plug-in hybrid, it is going to give you, similar electric range. It's a similar size overall, and it's quite a bit cheaper, same thing, compared to like a BMW X5 plug-in, things like that. So when you look at those premium brands, you're getting something that's, quite comparable. It feels, similar type of quality and fit and finish and everything to those vehicles, at a much more reasonable price point.
And to your point, it does feel like that because the Volvo is a good combination. And Volvo interiors I've always really enjoyed, and the Mazda interior feels just as good, or pretty close to just as good. I mean, that wool that Volvo has is its own.
That
special
is nice.
Space, yeah, that is nice. One, you talk about small things. One of my pet peeves is wireless charging, because I have there's been like 2 cars that it actually had a really good spot, and it's the
never
Mazda
works.
One, like,
never works.
You can't drive. If you're just stationary, you're just sitting there and you turn, you drive, you accelerate. You don't even have to drive hard. You just turn out of your driveway and it slides. And I feel like it's difficult from an automaker's perspective to try and get the right size, although it shouldn't be as hard as it sounds like. I mean, you've got iPhone Plus and you've got Androids that are big and you've got all sorts of smaller cars. Mine's in the mid. I've got an iPhone 14, just regular. My husband's is a Max, but it's constant. And the Mazda was really, really bad about that. I think Honda's pretty close to as bad about that, but the Mazda was just, I was like, this is just so pointless.
I'm trying to remember.
I always carry a cable, and we'll be on these trips and people tease me because I carry a cable, and I'm like,
I'll never tease you because I don't like having to use wireless charging for the same reason. There's somebody, and I can't remember which OEM. It sits so your phone isn't flat. It kind of sits like it's upright, like on its end and asleep.
Cadillac does that. They have a slot.
And it's slightly like the sides of it make me think almost like of a cup holder. They're slightly cushy so they can adjust if your phone is small or big. That's the only one. I can't. Is it Cadillac?
Cadillac does that. Cadillac does one. And Cadillac gets too tight, I feel like sometimes.
Oh, see, the one the one I had it where that's the only one I've ever had where the phone went in and I didn't. And then you hear your phone doing that diddle-loop, 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 as it's charging and not charging. You're like, seriously, I can't take this, and just take it out.
You just take it out. There was one. It's killing me because there was one that I've seen in the last 3 months that I was like, oh, okay, this is good. But I ended up not using it for that. So I just mentally thought, yeah, that looks like it should work really well, but didn't end up trying it. So that really, which is pretty minor in the scope of things. Mazda's infotainment still is just okay. That's It's something we're going to have to work with from them for a while. It's better than it was. But it's still not. It's and just do CarPlay.
Yeah. Well, and to be fair, they do support CarPlay, and interestingly, their native infotainment, you can only control it through the center controller. But if you plug in your phone, and you use CarPlay or Android Auto, then the touchscreen works. So the touchscreen does not work with the Mazda interface, but it does work with your phone interface.
That's one way to give people choice.
Yes.
Yeah. I just would like
your principles, because Mazda just actually, as we've all sat through the presentations, I think Mazda just feels like you should never touch a screen. You should have your hand on the wheel, and you should be driving, and you should never touch a screen, and it puts you out of form and all that. So that's an interesting thing too. That on theirs, if you use mine, I'm going to make you do it my way.
Yeah, I'm only going to be on board with never touching a screen if everything works perfectly. Like if I poke the screen and I poke the right spot, it's going to bring me whatever it is that I'm looking for. If I have to say 5 times directions to the airport, directions to the airport, directions to the airport to get it to hear me, then I'm not going to do it. I want to just touch the screen. It's that inability for it to make your life easy. It's wonky enough that I don't like it. Someday I will be all in, but not yet.
Those things have to start listening to me better than they do before I get on board with that. Siri hates me, so I can't use her.
Siri, she hates everyone, Stephanie.
Google Assistant works great for me.
Oh yeah? Well, aren't you special? No.
I am. I've talked to people who love it, and I've talked to people who love it. She just mishears anything that I said.
All right. Well, what was the other car you were driving?
The other car is the two-row Mercedes-AMG EQE SUV. And it's got the hyperscreen, wall-to-wall screen, and a really flowing design. I think if you think about the Cadillac Lyriq, I do like the Cadillac Lyriq's design, but it's pretty straight. It does go all the way across. This one has just more swoops in the way that it is. In the center stack, though, the center area of the screen, the navigation and the embedded map is so gorgeous. It is so pretty, and it's huge. And they have enough space in that screen that if you use their navigation, and it will pull up their little augmented reality where you get to the corner and it uses the camera to show you the turn that you need to make, and a little augmented reality blue arrow will tell you the direction. So you've got a little bit of visual there. But this screen is big enough that you can still see the map. So it only takes up half of it. So it's kind of interesting. You can see kind of both views. Plus, you do have eyes. Your eyes are actually helpful too. So it was an interesting way that they could lay all that out on it. I found that the passenger side screen was really great because I just had Joe change radio stations, so I could just do that in between, everything else, because he gets bored if I'm driving. So here, is there anything else you can do? I need that screen to have YouTube in it, so he can just watch YouTube videos for while I'm driving. But it's interesting that you can do it. You can put the map up on there, and you can send directions, and you can do sort of those things with the passenger screen. But that's part of the wide screen. Interesting. A couple of little things. The start button is down low in the center console area. Right, kind of where you would have it, but it's a small button in the middle of a bunch of other things, and I feel like at first I was like, where is this button? I don't really know. And then I was like, oh, okay, it's there. And then the second time I get in the car, I'm like, it was down there somewhere. I'm trying to find it. Can't find it. I find it. And then the parental stalk, park, reverse, drive, neutral. It operates the way that the Mercedes ones have before. It's off the stalk. It push up, but it's tiny. It's all of a sudden really small. I'm like, where is this thing? It's the size of a pencil now.
Yes.
What happened here? And I haven't found the volume button. I haven't found a volume button yet. I'm not entirely sure that it's there. That I just played with it a little bit, and the steering
They
wheel.
will tell you what volume you should be listening at.
And the one on the steering wheel, the control doesn't seem very precise. I was like pushing it's not quite right, not quite where I want it to be. On the other hand, I mean, the screens are amazing. Like what you can do in control and them. The light, I really do like what they've done with the interior lighting pattern.
Oh, it's beautiful.
And it's gorgeous. You can pick your color. The one that I have has red contrast stitching. So I've discovered that the blue interior light is not the right one. It just
with the red.
Blue with the red, and it just kind of bugged me. So like I went to a purple, which works. Purple and red sound like these are close, and that worked better than the blue. But no, I like that. It integrates sort of blind spot warnings and stuff too. So the side of the light the pipe does run all the way across the center dash, all the way across the dash, and then into the doors. It will like go red. So you just, as long as in the mirror you've got your blind spot,
Yeah.
you also have that other indicator there that's telling you something. And as you're talking to the Mercedes system, the light also reflects that it's listening and hearing. And so they're doing a lot of communication things to the owner and to the passengers with the lights, which I don't know. Is it just tricksy for right now and kind of cool because it's tricksy, but it is kind of cool. I did like that. I haven't pushed it super hard on going really fast. I've just done kind of a couple of errands with it, and just I was down at Woodward Dream Cruise, but I didn't cruise with this one.
No cruising.
I didn't cruise with this one. So I'm not going to go too far on the drivability yet. I need to put some more miles and drive on it. But overall, I'm curious about it. I like it. There's a lot of things that I think are really impressive, and a lot of things I'm like this is going to fit in really good, but do you need it? How do you need it? But I'm still just kind of wowed by the whole thing. Its exterior color is, I forget what they call it, but it's that gray. It's a dark, so it's this gray. So it's either concrete or primer if you don't like it. If you do like it, it's a really cool gray. So I was having a conversation. I was like, I'm not really loving the primer.
Is there really such a thing as a cool gray?
I like the grays when they look. I do like the ones that make me think of like I want to say Star Destroyer because Star Wars, but like a battleship. Like that battleshipy kind of dark matte gray. I do like those.
It's a little bit less matte, but it's dark gray like that. And it's funny because my Audi TT is a silver floppy gray, which I do really love. But this one, I'm not digging the color as much. But to show how color is really super subjective, a shuttle driver was driving me over to pick up the car, and what car do you? And I'm like, I'm like the gray car over there, and he's like, oh, the Mercedes. I was looking at that color is really great. It's awesome. I'm like, yeah, it
sure.
I'm not going to contradict his opinion at all, but it's interesting. It is kind of a polarizing color. I mean, I've had the car out with some other people too, and kind of saw the same thing. It's a really polarizing color, I think.
I like the
you either love it or you. Oops, sorry. Apologies for noise.
Her phone has a very emergency. Oh dear gosh! Look at your phone right now. Kind of beep you had going on there.
I hit the wrong button. I was trying to make it go totally silent, and
you turned it on.
That was my fault. Sorry, guys. I apologize.
So is that the selenite gray metallic? Is that the one?
Yeah. See, all right. Here's the thing. I can't read. I mean, I can read, but it's small.
It's tiny, teeny tiny little print.
Yeah, I'm
see what
looking,
the color is.
All right.
I'm looking at the build and price on the Mercedes site, and actually they don't have the configurator for the AMG version up yet. But just I'm looking at the EQE 500, which is the top version of the standard EQE SUV. And let's see, there's one, two, three,
it's
four,
space.
five,
Wait, no, that's the interior.
7, 8.
Manufacturer Alpine Gray.
Okay.
Manufacturer Alpine Gray. Yeah, the
so it's the light gray.
Yeah, it's the light.
So they have 9 colors on here. Well, 9 tones of color. Let's see. There's black,
9 tones,
polar white, obsidian black metallic, cirrus silver metallic, selenite gray metallic, manufacturer alpine gray, diamond white metallic. So now we're still in shades of between white and black of the 7 colors. Then there's emerald green metallic, which is a very dark green. It's a nice green, but it's very dark. almost black, and then twilight blue metallic, which is the only one that is clearly not on the spectrum between white and gray. That's the only color they have that is semi-bold.
Did you know that at the Celeste, the Escalade IQ background, it was sort of similar. There's red, and everything else is between white and black.
Yeah,
but at least there's red. Like there's one color.
Red.
If you like this, it's like you get one color or try and fly under the radar, which makes absolutely no sense with the size of that car. But still,
yeah.
It's about the size of a battleship.
Yeah, pretty much.
All right. Anything else on the AMG EQE SUV?
That's it. So far I still have a few more days in it and some more driving to do. It's impressive in a bazillion different ways. Its price. It's $133,900.
So it's super cheaps.
It starts the AMG EQE starts at $109,300. So you're starting at $110 and then building up from there. But it's in its own space, and it's a luxury buyers. It doesn't kind of matter.
Yeah, they don't care. It's like if you're in that space, it's like whatever, take my money. Like you're not shopping to save money at that.
You're not shopping to save money, and you're not necessarily saying, but I could get a different one that's 125, or I could get another one that's under 20, or not. You're just like, this is the car that I want. This is what I need. And you kind of go with it from there, I think. So the one thing I will add about the pricing, though, actually, is a conversation I've been sort of having over the last couple of weeks as we look at EV sales, if we look at this car, if we look at some of the others, the Escalade IQ being introduced recently, and Lucid, and the conversation about, sales. Oh no, maybe people don't want these cars. My theory would be that we may actually be running out of luxury buyers. Not completely running out, but when you slam everything at it, you've done so much in the post $100,000 space, you're going to see a little bit of slowdown, I think. And there's other reasons things are changing in that space, but I wonder if that's one of them too. The logic of going EV in luxury space is solid. You're looking at an owner that has more discretionary income. You're looking at an owner that generally will track more interested in technology and new things. And they have the ability to make some more decisions. They have more cars in the household. If something doesn't work perfectly, they can usually work through it a little bit better. So it makes sense. And they can support, at least get the automaker to some kind of margin. You've got some sort of prices elasticity in there. But if that's where the mythical everyone focuses, you're going to run out of people.
Yeah, there's only so many wealthy people out there.
People are no longer left.
The addressable market for those of us that are not quite so affluent is quite a bit larger.
Oh, Stephanie, that's a really good point, because like traditionally, right, most of us are not buying $100,000 plus cars. So it is a smaller segment of the population. Even if someone who is buying that car is probably someone who might not keep it for, what's the average now, 13 years. They can turn it over more quickly. So but even so, they're not probably not buying a new car every year. They're going to hold on to it for a little bit. And if they've gone in and they've bought their first EV and they have those vehicles, like, well, I'm going to sit with this for a little bit and get used to it and play with it for a couple of years. And it's like, oh, we got new ones and new ones and new ones. Like, I don't need another one. I just bought one 9 months ago. I'm good. There's only so many people that are going to buy into these very high prices. And even if it's not a luxury car, because EVs skew so much higher than the gas counterparts, and you do have truly cheap gas vehicles you can buy, you've priced that to a point where it's like,
well, except there's not so many of those anymore either. I
know, but I mean, comparatively, compared to what you start at for an EV versus what you can start at for a gas car, you can get something with a gas engine for a heck of a lot less than your average EV. And it does kind of, it's like, okay, once you hit your luxury, but you've cut out a chunk of the population by making them all more expensive cars. Like, you're not even selling to them. They're not even looking at a Mercedes,
No. And I mean, that's just like, again, this doesn't mean the policy, the strategy isn't sound. It is. But the other thing that's happening too is we've got all the gas engines, and all the regular ICE vehicles are in better inventory than they were. And when we look at what happened in 2022 and a little bit of 2021, and EV share, like just doing these jumps month after month after month after month, was partially impacted by the fact that there weren't enough regular cars, and a lot of people just didn't buy anything at all.
Right.
And that skews anything we read out of 22. And I think that's part of what's happening now. Part of it's pricing. Part of it is there's more vehicles available, which means people who were not in the market for EVs to begin with are now coming back and able to buy something. And it's slowing down. It doesn't mean EVs aren't going to be successful, nothing of the sort. It's just might slow down some of the share, and the volume's still going up, of course, but it might slow down some of the share growth this year. That's all.
Yeah. Smartphones have gotten way more expensive over the past decade, and all it takes is one impact on a hard floor to make you wish you had spent a few bucks to put a case on it. Going online without ExpressVPN is like not having a case for your phone, and it only costs a few dollars a month. Nicole, Robbie, and I travel a lot for our work, and we spend a lot of time in hotels, coffee shops, airplanes, and of course the Delta Sky Club. Connecting to the Wi-Fi in any public places with shared Wi-Fi puts your data at risk because bad actors could be intercepting what you send and using it to steal from you. It only takes some cheap hardware to intercept Wi-Fi data, and even a smart preteen can do it. Hackers can make up to $1,000 per victim selling personal information on the dark web. ExpressVPN stops the bad guys by creating a secure, encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet. ExpressVPN uses state-of-the-art encryption that would take a supercomputer up to 1 billion years to crack. I have ExpressVPN on all my devices, including a MacBook Pro, Windows laptops and desktops, and Android and iOS phones and laptops, or tablets. When I want to be secure, I just launch the app, click once to connect, and my data is secure. As I said, I travel a lot for my work, and I have to connect to countless public Wi-Fi networks in many countries. I have ExpressVPN on all my connected devices so that whoever else is on the same network can't see any of my data. That's important because I often have to check banks, credit card accounts, and transmit client data that might be sensitive, as well as filing articles on news that might be under embargo. ExpressVPN protects all of it, and I've been paying for my own account for years. Secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/wheelbearings. That's expressvpn.com/wheelbearings, and you can get an extra 4 months for free. expressvpn.com/wheelbearings.
Everyone's talking about AI these days, right? This season on Compiler, we're diving deep into how AI is reshaping the world we live in. Join us for a new season of Compiler, an original podcast from Red Hat. Subscribe now wherever you get your podcasts.
Are you feeling overwhelmed by hormonal changes? If you're a woman, you're not alone. With over 1,000 hormone disruptors in our environment, it's no wonder things can feel out of balance. On top of that, natural changes like PMS, menopause, and other life stages can leave you feeling tired, irritable, and trapped in a constant battle with your body. But here's the good news. You don't have to suffer through it. Hormone Harmony by Happy Mammoth is here to help. This herbal formula fine-tunes your hormones, balancing estrogen, testosterone, and even stress hormones like cortisol, which can contribute to weight gain, racing thoughts, poor sleep, and more. With over 40,000 five-star reviews and a bottle selling every 24 seconds, the results speak for themselves. Ready to feel like yourself again? For a limited time, get 15% off your first order at happymammoth.com using code NEXTCHAPTER at checkout. Visit happymammoth.com today and get your old self back naturally.
Did you know you can support Wheel Bearings directly? Head to patreon.com/wheelbearingsmedia and you can become a patron today. Your contributions will help fund the platforms and tools we use to bring the podcast to you. And exclusives and improvements are already on the way thanks to your generosity. So if you want to be part of an automotive podcast like no other, head to patreon.com/wheelbearingsmedia. We've updated the Wheel Bearings merch store, and now there's a whole bunch of new choices, new colors, new styles, t-shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies, hats, mugs, travel mugs, stickers, aprons, tote bags, you name it. You can get your Wheel Bearings merch at shop.wheelbearings.media. Go check it out. That's shop.wheelbearings.media. All right. So I also had an SUV this week. They had the 2023 Honda Pilot Trailsport. And my wife and I and our dog took a little road trip to the west side of Michigan last weekend for a little long weekend near South Haven, and took the Trailsport, which worked out really well. surprisingly well. The Trailsport, as everybody else is doing in the last couple of years, Honda has introduced an off-roady version of their of the Pilot, which has a little bit bigger all-terrain tires. It's got little slightly more rugged looking, with the blacked out wheel arches and so on. And the design of the new Pilot that came out last year or this year, whenever it came out, is consistent with the design language on the current generation of Hondas, starting with the Civic when it launched, and now the Accord, the CRV, especially the CRV. The front end of this basically looks like a CRV that's been just scaled up by 15-20%. And it's fine, especially on a utility. It's a little more blocky looking than the previous generation was. So it kind of fits, especially with the Trailsport trim. It kind of a good fit with that in terms of the aesthetics. This is not really, like, things like the Pathfinder, Rock Creek, and the Explorer Timberline, and assorted other similar things. This is not really truly an off-road vehicle. This is not something you're going to want to take to Moab, but it does fine on gravel roads and maybe a trail out to a cabin, things like that. And the place we were staying was turns out there's actually this chain of places called Getaway House, and they have, I don't know, about 15 locations around the country now, and they get a space in a forest, and they set up these little mini cabins that are really cute. They're not very big, but it's big enough that it's got a bathroom and a shower and a little kitchenette, with a couple of burners and a little fridge and a bed, queen size bed.
Cute.
Yeah, it's really, really cute.
Yeah.
Nice place to spend a weekend. There's a fire pit outside and a picnic table.
Ooh.
So it was nice for a little weekend getaway. Hence the name, Getaway House. Anyway, we drove across the state, in the Trailsport, had some, took a couple of beach chairs in case we decided to go to the beach, had assorted other stuff, some food, took some firewood along. And the Trailsport comes standard with the second row captain's chairs, and those are optional on other trims of the Pilot. And actually, before we left for our little getaway, I took it to go to Lowe's to pick up a new storm door, because we were having a new front door put on, and folding down the second and third row seats. This thing is big enough that I was actually able to fit a door entirely inside the vehicle, so the seats all fold flat. I was able to get it up, push it right up against the back of the driver's seat, and get it inside with the tailgate closed. So that's like 81 inches roughly. So if you need something to occasionally haul big stuff, like in terms of long stuff, it's actually pretty nice for that. Worked out really well for that. I didn't have to use my bungee cords or anything to keep the tailgate down. Lots of features on this one. It comes pretty well loaded. It's the powertrain is pretty much carryover, that Honda's been using on a lot of their vehicles for seemingly forever. It's their 3.5 liter V6, which has always been a good engine, smooth, relatively quiet, reasonably powerful, 285 horsepower. And they're, I think it's a 8-speed automatic transmission, and not a CVT, just a conventional automatic transmission. Works well. Again, shifts smoothly. You got a bunch of drive modes available on this thing. On the Trailsport, you get normal, eco, sport, snow, towing mode, and a trail sand mode. Again, not a lot of ground clearance on this, so you're not going to want to go rock crawling with this. It's like it's an inch more. It's 8.3 inches of ground clearance, so it's about an inch more than the standard Pilots, all the other Pilots. But again, it's going to be limited just because of ground clearance and a relatively long wheelbase. So you're not going to have a lot of breakover height. So stay away from boulders, things like that. But other than that, works great for everything else.
I love it. Stay away. Buy the Trailsport. Stay away from boulders. Like, okay, sound advice.
I was on the drive for that program, for that vehicle, and I was trying to find the name of the road that we drove on because there were boulders.
Did you drive over them, Stephanie, though, or did you drive around them?
We drove over some of them. We drove around some others.
Okay.
But it was outside of Sedona, Arizona, and I can't remember the name of the trail. And like I said, my search is not fast enough to give me that information. And it snowed that day. Apparently, that was not common necessarily. And the people who were on the wave before had a lot of rain, and we had snow, but it was gorgeous. And it can do not Moab level, but it holds its own on really some more ruddy off pavement stuff, and you really could get around some more boulders. It went up and down this canyon fine. No issues with it at all. Obviously they found a road that they knew it could work on, right?
Of
but
course.
yeah, there's always risk. There's always risk in those because we are drivers and people do make mistakes. So you could have gotten yourself in trouble. I was glad that it was just that the rain was over and we just had snow because some of the rocks were a little less the day before with more water and more wet rocks. I might have been a little bit more nervous, not so much because the vehicle can't do it, but just you get too much water and no traction.
Wet rocks get very slippery.
They're very not fun. Slippery. Yeah, they're a challenge.
But it was gorgeous, and I thought they did a decent job of making that sort of in between for whoever needs it, but that making that in between, off-road, off-pavement kind of thing. But they've been working with that for a bit. And I don't remember if they had something new to the engine. I felt like they did some stuff to the engine, but didn't change the displacement.
I mean, if they did anything, it was very minor tweaks because it's still the same power output as it's had for the past couple of generations. Across a bunch of different Honda and Acura vehicles, that around 285. So it's a good engine. It works. There's not a lot of reason to change it, except perhaps to get a little more fuel efficiency out of it. And the Trailsport, because it's riding, it's riding slightly higher, so you got a little more frontal area, and you've got the all-terrain tires on there, which are not really low rolling resistance. It is not rated quite as highly on EPA fuel economy. So it's rated 18 city, 23 highway, 20 combined. The other pilots, I think, are about 23 miles per gallon combined. So it's about 3 miles per gallon less. Most of the driving I did was largely highway driving or rural roads out in the western part of Michigan. So it was largely between 55 and 75 miles an hour most of the time, with relatively little stop and go. It does have auto stop start, and sometimes it does even shut off, but it restarts pretty quick, so it's fairly seamless compared to some systems. These systems have generally gotten a lot better in recent years, but so you can turn it off if you do find it too annoying. So I averaged about 21 and a half miles per gallon over the course of the week. Again, that included a lot of highway driving. So it's a little bit shy of the highway number, but better than the combined number that EPA that's on the label. So it's not bad. I mean, if you're looking for a 3-row utility, the infotainment system is it's not yet the newest version that Honda has. So it's their previous generation infotainment. So the Accord was the first one to launch their Android Automotive based system with Google services in it. So this one has the previous version, which works fine, and it has support for wireless CarPlay and Android Auto. Those work fine. You can also plug in your phone. There is a wireless charger in the front of the center console, with a tiny little ridge there that just might keep your phone in place so it'll actually charge. It charged my wife's phone for a while, not for very long, but it worked for a while, until had a little bit of a curve in the road and the phone shifted sideways and then stopped charging. but it's it's nice. It's a nice vehicle. Nothing too fancy or sophisticated. But it's in the you're in the same class with the Hyundai Palisade, the Kia Telluride, the Explorer, and lots and lots of other 3-row utilities, 3-row crossovers. So the one that I had, let me find the right tab here. Didn't come. Oh, sorry, I said 8-speed transmission. It's a 10-speed automatic. So you get 2 extra gears compared to what I said earlier. And
you're shorting it a couple of gears. Come on, Sam.
I didn't get a Monroney with this one, but I priced it out based as equipped. This is actually the pricing for the 2024 model, because the 23s are all gone. But I don't think the price has changed, or if it has, it's not by much. So it came to $50,630 all in. Which, again, is in the same ballpark as the Pathfinder and all those others of a similar ilk.
Probably in the same ballpark as the CX-90 with just the inline six too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Although the CX-90 is arguably more attractive, a little more premium feeling than this one.
Arguably.
Yeah. So that's the Honda Pilot all-wheel drive Trailsport.
But it does its job so well. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a family vehicle. Honda's really good at understanding what they want and what they need, and it's reliable, and it's it's not necessarily exciting in any specific way, but it's going to be very comfortable. It's going to be a really good companion for most anything that a family who needs 3 rows is going to go do.
And as long as when the lamp comes on in the instrument cluster and says, "Hey, time for your service, time for an oil change," go do that, and that's pretty much all you're ever going to have to do. And this thing will run largely forever. As long as you do that basic stuff. And this is one of those kinds of cars that it raises that average vehicle age of the fleet. Just because if you take care of it, it's going to run reliably for a long, long time and not give you any trouble.
I feel like this is the kind of car in a very good way that you get rid of it because you're tired of it. It doesn't give up on you by requiring you to fix. You're suddenly spending $1,000 a month, one small repair at a time. It's like, no, you know what? We've grown out of this vehicle. We want something smaller. We want something different. We want something more luxurious. There's a reason you're just like, it's fine.
It's time for a change.
Moved on. It's a time for a change. So if you're someone who wants to keep your car for a long while and that's part of your strategy, this nails it, because you're going to have this until you've just decided, I am done with it and I'm ready to move on to something new, not because it gives up on you.
Absolutely.
And one advantage of going with the Trailsport, especially if you live someplace like Michigan where our roads are often less than ideal, even though you will give up, a little bit of fuel economy with the slightly increased ride height and the all-terrain tires. Those all-terrain tires have enough sidewall that they are better able to withstand the pothole shocks. Mm-hmm. So you're less likely to blow out a tire on a Michigan pothole. So that's just something to consider.
All you homeowners have unique needs. Some feel the need to paint their door a vibrant shade of blue. Others have the need to decorate their bathroom with fish, anchors, and other nautical items. And because each homeowner has unique needs, Geico helps you get the right coverage for your home and what's in it. That way, you get exactly what's right for you, even if your needs are unique. Get more with Geico.
All righty, let's move on. So, mentioned that Robbie's out in Monterey this week. There's been some interesting stuff that's been introduced in recent days in Monterey. Mm-hmm. Let's stick with Honda for a second, but go over to the other side of the house to Acura. Acura revealed the production version of the ZDX, which is their first EV. Last year in Monterey, they showed the Precision EV concept, which was kind of a preview of the design direction for the ZDX. Now we've got the ZDX going on sale early in 2024, they say. We'll see if GM can actually deliver those. But that's the target, is to go on sale early 2024. What do you think of the ZDX?
I kind of like how it looks. I like the style. I like it. I know. Is this a love it or hate it kind of style? People are gonna love. I feel like. Do you hate it or do you love it, Stephanie?
Oh, actually, it's not love and hate. And just seeing the pictures,
right?
Just not really getting to see it in person. It was interesting, but not as exciting as I kind of wanted it to be. So I do like what they're doing with the lighting. I do like what they're doing with the lighting.
See, and I liked how. So I have this thing with EVs where so often it's like I feel like designers haven't quite figured out how design should work for the grille on an EV. They keep toying with it. Do you want a giant flat piece of metal? Do you want it to be so overly decorated it looks like a parade float? Like, where are you in there? What do you do with this expanse of space to do design stuff that no longer requires anything to be ventilated? Like, you don't need the grille to help cool the engine anymore and let air flow through. I like how they did this one. I like how the little part that has the like little A badge on it it's almost like it's a separate little section on the grill. So it divides it up. You still have a lot of flat metal expanse, but I like how they did that. That's like the first thing I notice on EVs now. Does the front actually look like something I want to look at it? Does it look like, I don't know, just slap a badge on there and make it plain? Like, I like how they did this one. So that appealed to me.
I do agree with that. I do like how they did that. It was kind of the rest of it just it looks fine. It looks exactly what I expected it to look like, right? And it's interesting because it shares with the Cadillac Lyriq, and they definitely went with a stiffer back end or whatever to get a little bit more capacity out of that. So it does definitely look different from the car that it shares with. But yeah, I would agree completely. I love what they did with the front. I love what they do with the lights. And the character in there is going to be really, and that's going to be great to see on the road.
I know, right? I can't wait to see how that looks like lit up too. Like when it's behind you at night, like what's that going to look like in the rearview mirror? It looks really cool.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, Steph, this is sharing its underpinnings with the Lyriq. So it has exactly the same wheelbase, the same battery, the same motors. There's going to be two versions, the A-Spec, which is rear wheel drive, and I think 340 horsepower, and the 500 horsepower all-wheel drive version. But basically everything above the platform, everything above the battery is unique to, at least visually unique to the Acura versus the Cadillac. But it does have similar proportions, which means it's got a long hood, that looks like it could have an engine under there, relatively long wheelbase. But, at least as far as we know so far, no front trunk. They haven't said anything about that. The interior is completely different from the Cadillac. Still a 2-row midsize, but instead of the big 35-inch display that you have in the Lyriq, it sticks with a more traditional, digital instrument cluster in front of the driver, like 11.5-inch center touchscreen. There are some things that I think that I noticed when I was looking through the photos that are not mentioned in the press release, but looking through the photos, I noticed a couple of things that are definite improvements over the Cadillac. If you look over on the passenger side, there is actually a little handle to open the glove box. You don't have to go searching through the menus to find a touch button to open the glove box. You can just grab that and pops down just like it should.
School.
Yeah. So it's I think looks very promising. I'm looking forward to trying this one out. Be interested to see how if at all it feels any different driving this one versus the Lyriq.
Well, I would like to too, but we need to drive a few more Lyriqs too.
Well, there's that too. Yeah,
that'd be nice too.
I still have not gotten back into a Lyriq since the original launch drive in June of last year in Utah.
Me either. Yeah, and so it's interesting. I pulled the specs too, and one of the things that I did think about with the ZDX and its wheelbase is 121.8. It's pretty long wheelbase. Overall length is 197.7. And I'm like, wow, the Lyriq doesn't feel that big. It doesn't look that big, and it's the exact. Yeah, the Lyriq is an inch shorter, but an inch is not what I'm saying, right?
Well, I think that's mostly from the front end of the ZDX, which kind of leans forward, kind of that shark nose profile there.
that inch is just design bumpers somewhere in there.
Yeah.
It's not anything meaningful in terms of space. But when you look at the MDX, which will run next to the ZDX, they're not necessarily replacing each other at this point, but 113.8 inches wheelbase. So you've got like 7 inches, right? Wheelbase on versus an MDX, and the MDX is 198.4 inches long. So you're half an inch, 0.6 inches longer, about a half an inch longer in the MDX. But you've got that much more. What is it, 9 inches, almost 9 inches? I don't know math. With the wheelbase being
a lot of math for a Sunday.
A lot of math for a Sunday. No, but you should have a lot more interior space, and it'll be interesting to see how that all comes together, and how it feels. So I'm looking forward to that. The screen I thought was interesting. Going 11 and 11, like you mentioned, on either side. As many EVs have gone to bigger screens on the inside, it makes sense that they don't have the Cadillac layout. I don't know if that's a matter of just not wanting to go that direction or Cadillac not sharing that sort of thing, but you would want those two to be separate from that view. But I was a little surprised that it's only 11 inches in the center stack and nothing. And we were just talking about the Mercedes, right? It's not necessarily going to compete with that, but the amount of screen space that's been popping up everywhere, I thought 11, and the pictures look fine. It looks fine in pictures. Again, not seeing it in person, that 11 inches may be perfectly fine and feel good in that space. But it on paper, it sounded a little bit smaller than what the competition is really doing right now.
It is kind of, you're right. Actually, I didn't really think of it. That is small. I mean, once upon a time, 11 inch screen seemed gigantic, right? It's not. That really, and like you said, it might work better because it is hard when we look at a picture. You're like, okay, I think that works, but does that work? Sometimes when you sit down, you think, oh, yeah, that really couldn't be any bigger than it is right now, or bigger, it's going to not work with the rest of the design. But it does seem small, Stephanie. You're right.
Just on paper, it does.
Yeah.
But you know what? I'll note, it was blue. So it was a color.
Yeah.
Woohoo!
We have a color.
Yeah, and it looks really good. It's a really nice shade of blue as well.
Yeah.
Looks really interesting. So hopefully they'll have at least a couple of other interesting colors available on this thing. One other feature that is new to the ZDX is Acura Watch 360 Plus hands-free driving assist, which is also known as GM Super Cruise. That's the Acura folks can confirm that yes, it is indeed Super Cruise. Different branding, but it's the same system, which is good because that's as hands-free systems go, I still think it's the best one out there.
I do too.
Yeah, I agree. It is by far the best one. So it's just everything about it in every way, it's better.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a nice way for Acura to get into. It's really Acura getting into the EV space by sharing with GM on this is saving them a bunch of time. And they're working on their own EV platforms. They have in other markets EVs already, but to get to the size and the space that they really needed here, and of course we know the Prologue is going to come up as well. That's related to the GM products, and Apple, and they will still have CarPlay on this, but so does the Lyriq.
Yeah. For now.
So for now. And so I'm curious to see when that transition really happens for the Lyriq, because GM went with the Google built-in and and I don't have all the answers for this yet. I haven't called them yet, but the Google built-in system that went into the Canyon in Colorado and is going into future EVs, we are still talking 12 months after the Lyriq. And if that's yet again a different version than what we're actually they're both Google built in, than what we're actually seeing in the Lyriq. Because the Lyriq does still offer CarPlay, and Acura does, and Honda has already said that they're going to offer CarPlay as well. Another interesting kind of supplier side thing, right, on this is Acura's decision to go with Bang & Olufsen, right?
Yeah, they've switched. They've used the Elliott Schneier studio stuff, the ELS studio, for I don't know 15, 17 years now.
And it's worked out really well for them. But this switch, I feel, is driven by GM using Harman and the AKG going into the Cadillac products and a number of other other things on the GM side. So it feels like they just sort of migrated to the Harman library of stereo systems for this vehicle. But the way that they presented it and the way that they talked about the change to Bang & Olufsen, they made it sound like they're going to continue to go forward with their other projects. Even the non-GM projects are still going to go. So they've made a switch to Harman, which
and this happens from time to time with most automakers. They'll get a better deal with some other brand, or just decide it's time for a change.
It's time for a change.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, either, the Bang & Olufsen system will be terrific. The L8 China system was terrific. So either way, you're going to have a highly competitive audio system for the luxury segment.
To be fair, most modern vehicles, the premium audio systems, even the standard audio systems, all sound pretty decent now. And the premium ones, generally sound really, really good. So, I'm sure this will be fine. It'll be excellent. All right. Well, let's move on to another new EV. Another brand launched its first EV in Monterey a couple of days ago. That is the Lamborghini Lanzador. I spoke with Stefan Winkelmann, the CEO of Lamborghini, a few weeks back, and he talked off the record a little bit about this car. So this is a preview of the first production battery electric vehicle from Lamborghini that's coming. The production version is coming in 2028. This will be the fourth model in the Lamborghini lineup, joining the Revuelto, which is just launching now as their plug-in hybrid V12 hypercar, the successor to the Huracan that's coming next year, which will also be a plug-in hybrid, and then also a plug-in hybrid version of the Urus. And this is when I talked with Winkelmann, he described this as a GT, kind of going back to the origins of Lamborghini. Before they built, the original Miura and then the Countach and other sports cars, their first few models were GT cars. They were coupes with 4 seats. And he described this as a GT, and Lamborghini describes this as a GT, but really it's more kind of more like the Urus than it is like any other Lamborghini in terms of its kind of overall look, but with a fastback. They describe it in here as a high ground clearance GT.
I think it looks like a squished Urus. Like you just took your hand down the roof and you just squished the clay model, and they're like, let's build it this way.
Yeah, but it looks very Lamborghini.
It does, with all those angles. Like it has to have angles to be a Lamborghini.
Yeah, it definitely fits the brand.
It does.
So,
and I'm looking through the pictures too as we go through this and reminding myself, but I'm intrigued. I'm very intrigued by this. It's kind of cool looking, more so than the Urus.
But it's a 2-door, so there's that. That's good. 4 seats. 1,000 kilowatts, so about 1,340 horsepower. So it it should move along the way you would expect a Lamborghini to move. One thing that's going to be interesting, and this is something that I talked with Winkelmann about, what's it going to sound like, and that's something we don't know yet. And he said, they're still working on what electric Lamborghinis should sound like. And this is something that every manufacturer is kind of still struggling with, trying to figure out, how do you transition that sound?
Yeah. What sound makes?
I feel like we have to use just no sound and just the really quiet, annoying little buzz that happens when you're under, 30 miles an hour, because they make you do that so you don't accidentally hit a pedestrian. We just all have to like a uniform little bzzz when we're coming, and just say goodbye to the sounds of engines that don't exist anymore.
I'm okay with the idea of getting of sort of saying goodbye to the sound. Where I struggle with this subject in general is sound is still part of how you sense things.
Yeah.
And an absence of sound is still kind of strange. Does it need to sound like an engine? No, it doesn't need to do that at all. It doesn't need a fake engine. But what is this turbine thing supposed to sound and feel like? And it's going to take a while to sort it through. there's so much of this EV stuff that is new, and it's okay. It's okay if it takes a decade to figure it out, and that can be a problem.
It's not going to happen overnight. And I think you're right. I think it's one of those things, like, it took a long time to make the gas engine cars that we have now. It wasn't something overnight. They sounded the way they sound. It was a very slow. Think about how cars, when you hear an old car start, oh, good Lord. Like, they've changed over the years, right? Even if you look at a car from the 50s, or you look at a car from the 70s, or a car from the 90s, they sound different just between as the technology changes and just what we want as of the public going through time. So I don't think we quite know with how new EVs are what we all really want to hear. And it's going to take some time to figure it out, what we feel comfortable with.
Yeah, I think so. The good thing is everybody's talking about it and thinking about it. That's first step of solving a problem, right? Yep. But that'll take it back. No, this Lamborghini is this Lanzador. I like the name.
Lanzador. I like the name too. I was thinking that it's a fun name.
It's a fun name, right?
Yeah.
I don't
certainly
like
easier to say than Revuelto.
Well, and it's easier than Urus because everyone's like Urus, Urus, Uros. Like, nobody's Lanzador. It looks like Lanzador. Hey, we all got this one.
All right.
Thanks for pronunciation.
So one more Monterey debut that came up as pretty much a complete surprise. I don't think I hadn't until the day before it was revealed. I hadn't seen or heard anything about this. I hadn't heard anybody talking about this. It's the Ford Mustang GTD, which, as Ford likes to describe it, is the most audacious Mustang ever. And when I spoke with Ollie Jamul after dinner the other night, I think he probably used the word audacious at least 4 or 5 times in
Marketing.
like 15 minutes. Yeah. he was, after I turned off the recorder, I told him, you've definitely been media trained very well by these guys. He was totally on message, never deviated from the message at all. Which, I posted that interview on the Patreon feed, and we'll probably include it in the main show next week. But I already had one comment from a listener saying, yeah, you tried really hard to get him to say something, and he just stuck right with it. It's like, yep. And I know, for the PR guys that are always watching over when we have these conversations, they're always relieved when the executives stay on message. But
I think they're always relieved when that ends. When you're like, okay, thanks. You can almost see them do this, like, I got him through another one.
So the GTD, unlike the GT3, which is the race car that's going to go to Le Mans next year and run in the IMSA series as well, is somewhat derived from the production Mustangs. And in the past, all the highest performance Mustangs have been really more derivative, higher performance derivatives of more pedestrian Mustangs. This one is really, is very much derived, from taking the GT3 race car, which is very different in a lot of ways from all other Mustangs, and basically turning it into a road car. And in the press release, there was an interesting quote in there where they said, this is the first time that we've taken a race car, designed a race car and then developed a road car from that. And that's not actually entirely true, because back about 5-6 years ago, I think it was in 2017. Yeah, it was 2017. The year after the Ford GT won the GTE class at Le Mans, Larry Holt, who is the chief technical officer at Multimatic, which is Ford's partner for their high-end racing programs, and they're actually going to be building these. They built the GT. They're building the Mustang GTD. Larry is a very interesting guy. In his presentation, he was going through, kind of the origins of the most recent GT, and the fact that Ford, when they decided to do the program, what their goal was to actually go back to Le Mans and win again after 50 years after they first won in 1966. That was their goal. And before they gave the go-ahead to do what became the GT, they did feasibility studies, and they looked at doing a Mustang, a GTE class Mustang, and taking that to Le Mans and deciding, no, this is going to be, it's too big, too heavy, too much. We can't do the aero the way we want for this class of racing. And so what they did was they said, okay, here's the rule book. What can we do within this rule book? And they designed a race car. They designed a car to get the maximum performance out of that rule set, and then built a road car from that. And that became the Ford GT that is just ending production. That's basically what they've done here, is they took the GT3 car that they had designed and they made a road car and said, okay, now that we don't have these racing restrictions, like, how big the engine can be, how much power it can have, suspension things, what can we do with it to make the ultimate road going Mustang? And what you have is the GTD, which looks a lot like the GT3 car. It's got the fender vents and the big wing on the back. None of the body panels are actually common. They just look very similar. And this thing's going to have, instead of a 5.4 liter naturally aspirated V8, an 800 horsepower supercharged V8. So it's basically an upgraded version of the engine from the outgoing GT500, which has, I think, 760 horsepower. So they've gone to a dry sump oil system on there, carbon fiber bodywork. They moved the transmission to the back. It's got an 8-speed DCT transaxle at the rear end of the car to balance the weight. Semi-active suspension system from Multimatic, all kinds of other cool things. Even has active aerodynamics, so that the rear wing, the upper flap of the rear wing at high speeds and when the car is going in a straight line, opens up. It goes from being at an angle to basically being horizontal to reduce the drag, which, if you watch Formula One, you'll be familiar. It works basically exactly the same way as the drag reduction system on Formula One cars. That's what they do. And funny, going back to my interview with Ali Jamul, I asked him, were you inspired by Formula One cars and doing that? And even that he wouldn't acknowledge, even though it's utterly obvious.
That is not on my message. I can say nothing.
Formula One?
You look at the animation and how it works. Yeah, it works exactly the same way as a Formula One rear wing, but whatever. So what do you think of what do you think of the Mustang GTD?
It's $300,000.
Oh yeah, there's that. I forgot to mention that part.
I mean, it's obviously well worth the money in terms of what you're getting for it and everything they've put into it, and it's a low volume thing. It's interesting to kind of push this direction in contrast with the EV stuff that's going on too. That's sort of one foot in one camp and the other, and because they had the GT, you're like, okay, well, it's a baby brother to what you did to the GT. It's cool, and it's $300,000. And Ford GT was was $450, $500. So they're not the same price point at all. It's definitely cheaper, but it's still a Mustang at $300,000. And I admit that I'm sort of going, oh, okay, it looks cool. So it's a good thing they're not going to make a ton of them. It'll be super special. It will be special for anybody who wants to jump in and buy it. It's amazing technology, and the drivability should be amazing, and definitely looks the part. But there's a little bit of a like, oh, okay. Now the timing is nice because there's nothing. The Challenger and Chargers that are 800 horsepower are exiting this year, although this is not in that class. And
so you could buy 3 or 4 of those, depending on your point of view, or one of these.
It's not really a competitor for that. So it is in its own space. So it's, on one hand, it's really cool that they're still paying attention to this space. On the other hand, it's a lot of money for the Mustang name to carry. And I don't know if that's going to ultimately matter and it looks, to your point, it looks so much like a regular Mustang on steroids on. That's a huge number for them to carry. But you've got people buying the GT3 that are going to track it and race it. So you've got a gentleman driver racer who may step into it because they're thinking about things in an entirely different way, and they'll look more at the performance. And it does look good.
Yeah,
like it's not an ugly Mustang at all.
No, it's gorgeous.
Right.
It's a beautiful car.
And we were talking, you and I, Steph, with Mark Phelan from the Detroit Free Press at dinner the other night. And we're talking about, why they unveiled this car in Monterey versus showing it here in Detroit for the Dream Cruise. And one thing you brought up, is probably the fact that at this point, since this car is not coming out until late next year, early 2025, the one they showed in Monterey is probably the only one that exists, at least, in that showable form. There's also at least one prototype that they had in the videos. But as you mentioned, Mustang GT3 is going into, the GTD class in IMSA and the GT3 LMGT3 class in the World Endurance Championship next year. And in those classes, a lot of it, and also in other series in SRO and others, these GT3 cars are largely, in most cases, are Pro-Am driver lineups. So you'll have a professional driver, and the FIA has different driver classifications based on your experience and what whether you've what you've won and so on, and then so typically there's a gold or a platinum driver and then a bronze rated driver, who's an amateur. They're not doing this full time, and these are usually very rich guys who also happen to be pretty good drivers. People like Ben Keating, who's won all kinds of stuff in many classes,
like Jim Farley.
And Jim Farley, yeah. I don't know if Jim's got a bronze license or not, but and these guys, these rich guys, these rich bronze rated drivers, they're the ones that usually bring the money to these teams, bring the sponsorship, bring the money that funds these teams, that allows them to pay the pro drivers to come in and do this stuff. And I can see, a lot of those same type of people are the ones who are wandering around Monterey this weekend. And I can see, somebody who's thinking about buying a Mustang GT3 to run next year in, World Challenge or IMSA or, Asian Le Mans series or, any of these series, thinking, it would be really cool to have a car that looks just like my race car, that I can drive to the track in this car, get out of the road car, hop into the race car that looks almost exactly the same. And then after the race, get back into my road car, drive that back up, assuming that they're not flying in a helicopter. So, those same people that are paying for these racing programs are, also the ones who are likely to be, in most cases, buying these GTDs.
And most of them were in Monterey last week. So
yeah, everyone's in Monterey.
Monterey was the more logical place to do that. Although, speaking with Ford, somebody told me there was actually a consumer event in Las Vegas. There was a couple of days before that. And so the real was to consumers in Vegas just ahead of Monterey. And the leaks didn't really come out for 24 hours or so after the event, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Like, people that were there just kept their mouth shut for a day.
Which is amazing.
I was like, the PR person I was talking to was like, well, we had 300 people there. There was no picking their phones. There was no covering up their cameras. You just had to wait.
You just have to hope.
Hope that it worked.
And it worked remarkably well. I mean, this is one of those few times when very few details were leaked out ahead of time.
Yeah, and so it is amazing, and it's very specific in that space. And to the Monterey versus Detroit versus wherever introduction, Monterey is where enough of the people who are in that interest zone and spending that kind of money, that's where they were. They're not going to fly to Detroit for the show. And the only miss maybe would be, I don't know if it was at Monterey Historics at all on Saturday. That would have been a really good place to at least have it.
I think they actually did take the car to Laguna yesterday for the for the historic races. So I think they had
those
it on,
are the people.
I don't think they ran it there, but I think they had it on display there.
Yeah.
Yeah, display would have been good enough.
Which makes sense.
Because a lot of those same drivers are, they also own collections of historic race cars, and they're out there running those vintage race cars at Laguna Seca on Saturday. And as we're recording, today is the Concours at Pebble Beach. So
yeah.
All right. Well, let's stick with Ford for a moment. Over the last couple of years with the inventory shortages, automakers got really used to having elevated transaction prices on cars because, if they could only build, say, 100,000 of some model instead of 200,000, well, they focused on building the most premium versions of those and getting as much money out of those as they possibly could. One example of that, was the Bronco. Ford, and with the Maverick, Ford tried to emphasize the higher end versions of those, and same goes for everything that they were able to build. For 2024 model year, Ford is discontinuing the base version of the Bronco that they've been offering. And I don't know how many of those they've actually sold over the last couple of years, but this was the version that had steel wheels and, minimum of options on there. And when they launched the Bronco, it was interesting that they said, we're offering this one because, we've got so much customizability available with these things. And a lot of people buy this kind of vehicle, buy Wranglers, and are going to buy Broncos, are going to customize their vehicles with all kinds of aftermarket accessories, and they talked, about all the couple of hundred different accessories that they had from launch. They offered this version with the steel wheels because said, well, a lot of these customers, they're just going to take this and they're going to throw away those stock wheels anyway and put on big 35, 37 inch tires for off-roading. Well, now they don't have that option anymore. They're gonna have to buy the they're
gonna have to buy the Big Bend.
Big Bend. Yes,
I want to say Badlands, and I'm like, that's not it.
No, the Big Bend is the one I was trying to think of. They're gonna have to buy that version and then throw away more expensive aluminum wheels. And that means that the base price tag is going to be $4,000 higher. So you're going to be starting at $40,000 now for a Bronco, for 2024.
I have to imagine that they wouldn't be doing that if they hadn't already decided the number of people who are buying it at the base trim is so small. We're only getting X. We'll lose a small percentage of them, but by the small number of people that would still just, okay, I'll go up a trim, we're going to make more in the end. Like it has to, financially it's, it's just like, suck it up, everybody who wanted to save $4,000. No one's buying that version.
Yeah. And it could be as you work with a product like this one too, just modifying the go-to-market strategy over time. If that was the plan, I remember as well, Sam, that they were going to just you had this base one that you could strip, you could do whatever, and maybe just partly too the base engine, even the people who want to modify it, they didn't want to stick with that base engine. Maybe they wanted just a little bit more than what was there in terms of feature content, even if they're throwing away bigger wheels. That just wasn't quite enough. I mean, most presentations and conversations that I'll sit through, when you ask about what the take rate is for the very base car of anything, it doesn't matter.
Usually pretty small.
Yeah.
They're like maybe 5%, but we need it there so that we have like something that pops on the website that says it's below $38,000.
Right. Advertising and marketing once again.
Mm-hmm.
It's that, but it's really not where the take rate is. And while inventory is better, supply chain is better, disruptions are slower, we still don't have enough chips to do everything that we need. We're at a normal inventory level. So if nobody's really taking this one, you let it go and let people kind of move up. And I think that there are definitely people who take the time to modify, but those sort of Everglades editions and all of the editions that really do get something that is a little bit special, a little bit unique, but not quite as much effort to pick your own wheels. I think people do respond to those as well. So it does change the pricing structure, which people we'll see complaints and we'll see conversations about that. But I don't think it's going to change their sales mix at all.
Probably not, or just a trivial amount.
Yeah.
Like you said, I don't think most people were actually buying the that base model anyway. They would probably start with one of the other trims, and frankly, Ford offers enough different variations of this, from the Big Bend to the Everglades, which is back for 24 model year, and the Raptor, that there's something in there for just about everybody anyway. You can get, and you can still put your winches and lights and everything else on there. Plus, it also simplifies the build, in the factory, because, one of the things, manufacturers are always trying to do is get to fewer buildable combinations, because that adds complexity and adds cost in the manufacturing process.
Yeah. And I wonder if we're tripping it, just watching it overall. So we hear a lot of conversation about vehicles not being affordable enough and nothing, it's all too much right now, which is a fair complaint. But at the same time, when you look at buyers, they want stuff. Buyers aren't necessarily, even more, I think, than not before COVID, but just over time, the level of safety that we expect, the level of entertainment that we expect, the level of convenience that we expect in cars sort of naturally put people to that second or third mid-level vehicle. And that base is much, much more difficult to sell because the people are just, they want stuff. The level that you're ready to settle for now is no longer roll up windows and no AC. Like that ship sailed ages ago. It's gone. So this car is now going to be $4,000 more than it was, but people have the ability to understand why necessarily, or what they're getting for that $4,000, and they're not necessarily. I don't hear feedback that people are willing to settle on the same way that they once were. And we do have people who are just looking. They need transportation, and there's a fixed budget, and the choices are going to be limited in that space. But they aren't necessarily saying they want to give up a lot. They still want the same technology that another car has, which puts them in a difficult position. But if they can figure out how to scrape those extra dollars, they'll scrape those extra dollars together to get the technology that they want, and at whatever vein, whether they're more safety or whether they're more infotainment. I think as consumers' demands have grown as well, and that's going to keep prices up a little bit because at the end of the day, you have to pay for it.
My daughter has inherited a Kia Rio that was purchased on purpose to be the cheapest possible Kia Rio one could get, and has crank windows. And can I just tell you, I had to drive her car for a hot minute, and I was like, "What the? Oh my gosh!" like I had a second. I'm like, "Where? It's not a Jeep. They're not on the center console. Oh, it's like this handle thing." Like I was like, I can't even remember the last time I was in a car that actually crank windows.
Have your daughters ever used a rotary dial telephone?
No, a funny story. So we went to the Universal Studios where the Harry Potter land is, and anybody Harry Potter fan, there's a thing where they dial a phone, and you can dial the little phone at Harry Potter, whatever, the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, and it plays a little message. And my daughter, I don't know, it was maybe 10 years ago, she was like maybe 12 or so. She walks into the little phone booth to do the little thing, and she opens the door back up. She's like, I don't get it. Yeah. I had to go in and show her how to dial. I'm like, you put your finger in this thing and you pull it all the way to here. She's like, oh, and she had no idea how one worked.
Same thing with my younger kid when they were 10, encountered a rotary dial phone for the first time and had no clue at all how to use it. It's like, I mean, this is what we grew up with.
Yeah, it was.
So, all right. Okay. And then one last thing with Ford, actually, there's a couple of different stories, part of which includes Jim Farley, the CEO of Ford. As we've talked about many times here, the state of DC fast charging in America sucks. And now we have yet another piece of data to back that up, although any of us that have actually tried to use it are well aware of this. And Jim Farley, I guess, over the last couple of weeks was doing a road trip from Detroit to the West Coast in an F-150 Lightning. And he also experienced that Yeah, charging sucks. And he tweeted a couple of things out, or posted it. I guess he also maybe posted it on Threads or Blue Sky as well, in addition to the site formerly known as Twitter. Saying that it's definitely bad, and that's why we're switching over to NACS, and we're gonna have support for the Tesla superchargers next year in our EVs. But JD Power had their most recent edition of their charging satisfaction index, and to no one's surprise, the scores went down from last year. For DC fast charging, it went from 674 on a 1,000-point scale to 654. But even level 2 charging also went down from 633 to 617. So the companies running these chargers, they need to get their act together, or this is causing a real problem for automakers that are planning to try and sell all these EVs. If the charging system doesn't work, people are not going to want to buy these EVs.
Well, I think part of it that we're seeing too for the ratings dropping is that as more and more people are willing to give it a go, as it becomes less of a strange, scary thing, and you say, okay, I'm going to give this EV charging thing a try, you get people who aren't necessarily EV enthusiasts or evangelists. You get more average people, and average people want their new EV to be as easy and simple to use as their gas vehicle was. And their experience, where somebody who's just like, I'm really going to buy into the EV thing. I want to have the first, the newest, the coolest. I'm willing to accept some inconvenience. There's more and more people who, no, I'm not willing to accept the inconvenience. I need to get this charged. I need to get on my way. And I think you're having people finding that more just average folks trying to live an average life are finding that it can be quite a challenge.
It can be. And, I mentioned earlier, through the first 6 months of the year, because I don't have it all the way through August, but EV share is 7.1%. We haven't tripped any mainstream. We haven't tripped early adapters. We're still in this first, we're going to try it because we can space. And I remember noticing at the end of last year, I'm like, this is going to be the thing for the next year. We were just going to hear people complain about how bad the system is. It's not going to get changed in 2023. Mm-hmm. You'll see pockets here and there, and there's obviously money invested, and there's obviously the charging companies are being put to task, rightfully so, to make changes, and they're being pushed to make changes, but they won't happen in 5 minutes. They won't happen in 2 months. They won't happen in 6 months. Just because the $7.5 billion is out there, and some of it's been distributed, it's not all been distributed, and yet, you still have to build things after that. And so it's going to take us some time. One of the things that I kind of like to sort of remind people, 1913 was when we had the first pull-up station. It wasn't self-service.
Wow.
The pull-up station for gas. It was 1964 that we had the first remote self-service gas pumps, which meant that you could sort of pump yourself. Right before that, you had to have an attendant there to reset the pump and take the money, blah, blah, blah. So in 50 years, we got from here to there, to being able to pull up and buy gas in some sort of jar, to being able to run your own pump. And then we saw more changes coming after that. And we're looking at an entirely new infrastructure and saying, oh my gosh, we've been able to buy EVs for 5 years, excluding some of the early Teslas, right? And why on earth is this system just not here? Well, take a breath. Take a breath. Explore it out, and research out what you need and figure it out. And it's going to be difficult for a while. And I think, to your point, Nicole, too, we are still seeing some people who aren't as familiar come in, and that's going to happen, and more and more and more. We're going to see that. But I also think that we're going to find, when we do kind of get to more of a mainstream buyer, that when they try it, they're going to do things that surprise us in the way that they manage their charging life. They have expectations walking into it now that it's going to be just like it was before. And I think that what probably ends up happening is they learn different habits and different patterns, even from what we're thinking of. I think people will learn that their actual driving range and needs in a given week are 200 miles. And that as the infrastructure, and at the same time, the infrastructure is going to be keeping improving and growing. They aren't necessarily going to expect the same thing, and they're going to start to realize that they're paying for a lot of battery they don't need, and ask some of those questions. Again, we will have infrastructure continuing to improve, which will help. People will start charging it overnight at home or every 2 days at home, whatever it is they need, and start to be really comfortable with that. So there's a mix of things that are happening to make it all better. But I didn't really think that 23 was going to be a good year for this.
Yeah.
And it's good to see the pressure on it, though, because that's the biggest weak spot. Automakers need to participate, but it's not necessarily 100% their job to create the infrastructure to do that. They don't own gas stations.
Although, increasingly automakers are getting, directly involved in that. I mean, Tesla has been doing that for a decade now with their supercharger network. And, a few weeks ago, we had the big announcement from 6 automakers. They were going to invest to build 30,000 chargers over the next several years. So, they're recognizing, the automakers are recognizing that we cannot rely on these other companies at this point. They have not proven that they can be trusted to do the job right. So we are going to have to get more directly involved and
I agree.
make sure that infrastructure is there.
And when I say it's not, I don't think it's their job necessarily to build the infrastructure. It's not the same thing as not having a vested interest in finding a way to help it. And Tesla needed the supercharger networks in order to get where they were. So they were in a different environment in a lot of ways. Just being pushing that edge, and they're not going to stop developing their network. It's going to continue. I like the agreement you just referred to with the 6 or 7, depending on if you count Hyundai and Kias too, right?
Yeah, I'm counting them as one.
I know. But they liked it. It was all 7. All the headlines were 7, right?
Yeah.
But at any rate, regardless of how you count that, that to me was a really neat arrangement and agreement, because it'll have both charging connectors, both CCS and NACS, because Hyundai and Kia and Stellantis and some of the others involved haven't decided to move to NACS yet. But being a shared environment, it gives more potential to get more funding, kind of. And it doesn't have to be one automaker. We don't need, 40 automakers. We don't need 40 supercharger networks. We need more than one, but somewhere between 1 and 40 sounds like better space.
Although, to be fair, I mean, look at gas stations. I mean, there are a lot of brands of fueling stations. So, you can have that competition. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but certainly, when you look at the capital investment required to build out these charging networks, a collaboration, at least at this stage, makes a lot of sense for them to partner. And, several of the automakers that were part of that announcement are also part of a similar joint venture in Europe called Ionity. So if you're in Europe, the Ionity charging network is also owned by a consortium of automakers, including BMW, and I think Ford is an investor in Ionity, and Volkswagen, and a few others. So it's good that they're recognizing this. And, they, again, as I said, the automakers recognize that for the investment that they're making in the vehicles and, building batteries, building the vehicles, they are going to have to, if they ever want to recoup that investment, they know their customers have to trust that they're going to be able to charge these vehicles. And, the people buying EVs today are, still very much early adopters. They are much more likely to have charging available or off-street parking available at home so they can charge at home overnight. But as you look forward, in the United States, we have 290 million registered vehicles on the road. About 2 million of those are electric. And most people never buy new vehicles. Most people only buy used vehicles. You sell 3 times as many used vehicles in the US every year as new cars. And as you get into that used vehicle market, which these cars are eventually going to do over the next several years, a much higher percentage of those people do not have off-street parking. They live in apartments, condos, townhouses, or even live in even in single-family homes in urban areas where often they do have to park curbside. And so they are going to be relying on some form of public charging infrastructure. Some of that's going to be DC fast charging. Some of it is going to be, some development of curbside level 2 charging, so that, people that are parked overnight, they can plug in, at the curbside. And there's going to be a variety of solutions, but, that all needs to be developed, and that takes time and a lot of money.
Exactly. It takes time. It takes a lot of money. And DC fast is the easiest conversation, but it's not actually the one that we need the most of. I think, to your point, it's the level 2s on city streets that are going to make the most impact, really, for a lot of this movement and a lot of this change. And it's good that they were involved, and a lot of the automakers that have been involved in that consortium or the others, they've been trying different ways to help build networks for their customers. No one has ignored this issue.
Yeah, I mean, GM's got their community fast charging program with dealers,
and they're still doing the Pilot Flying J program. It's still part of this, and they're part of the 7. And they're doing the Tesla thing. So GM has been all the way through. Nissan dealers have put their stuff in. Nissan started from the beginning trying to be involved with whatever charging situations were available, even with the first Leaf, even when it was not very many charging stations for anybody. So, they've always been involved. But what we're seeing now is you need to kind of jump the gate a little bit and push it. So it's good that we're having a lot of pressure to make it go faster than it would otherwise, but it's also still going to have to take time. So we're in that sort of mixed scenario in that space. But I like the consortium idea a lot. Hopefully others will join that consortium too. And the other beautiful thing is, if you look at business on Wall Street and that kind of side of things, the consortium feels like something that, once it served its purpose of getting people moving forward, these automakers could sell off their part. Yeah. They don't have to maintain this for the rest of its entirety. Or if they decide that it's getting a good enough revenue stream, maybe they do keep it, right? They don't have to do one or the other. But there is an opportunity to help create a business, I think, in a way that makes a little bit more sense to me than having all 40. And you're right, Sam, we do need competition. We don't, and it's going to be more than one. It's going to be a number of them out there. We have a lot of gas stations, brands. We have a lot of gas providers. But still, I think there's kind of a blend in there. The EVgo's and the charge points and the guys that are struggling now, that are not, necessarily, that they're going to figure their stuff out too.
Yeah,
like they're going to understand that how, why we never thought we needed canopies. I don't understand, but at the time it made sense. Like, oh, let's just get this thing up there. It's still a learning process. I mean, those two things that I just said, one thing happened in 1913, one in 1964. There's pages of what happened in between. And we will develop an EV infrastructure far faster than we develop the gasoline infrastructure. I just like to look at those and kind of say, let's take a breath. Let's keep moving forward, but recognize that it's going to take time.
Well, it really is. And that's, like you said, it's going to move faster than we did when we first had cars, and cars were a new deal. But still, like, when you think about it, where cars were in 1913 to where they are today, and how much had to change, how many things changed, how many pieces got us to where we are right now. And it took a lot of time to do that. We're kind of sort of trying to do that all over again with this EV technology. And yeah, we're going to do it faster. And yeah, we have more, it's not going to take as long, but give it a chance. It's going to take time. You think about how long that took. There's no way we can affect that kind of change in 5 minutes. You can pump all the money you want into the process. It's still, you got to build stuff. You got to have electricity in the right places, the right amount of electricity, it is such a complicated thing that we're trying to accomplish, and to expect to go, okay, we went from horses to cars in this long. Now let's go from from a gas car to an electric one in 35 seconds. That doesn't happen. It takes time.
Everybody praises Tesla and how fast they move, but it's taken them 10 years to build 20,000 chargers. Right. And it's probably going to take half that time for this new consortium to build 30,000, and all the others that are out there that are doing this. So
yeah.
All right. Let's talk about one more before we do some listener questions. And that is the Toyota Supra for 2023 model year added an option for a manual transmission. Previous to that, it was only available with an automatic. And amazingly, almost 50% of Supra buyers are opting for the 3-pedal setup. What do you think about that?
Absolutely not surprising at all. I mean, if you're buying a fun little car like that, to not have an automatic sort of makes you want to cry. I mean, to not have a manual makes you want to cry. So the fact that they're like, yeah, it doesn't surprise me in the least. I think it's fun.
Yeah, I think it's fun. It doesn't mean that everyone wants manuals, but it does mean that there is certainly a slice of a sports car driver that still wants to shift for themselves. I do own 3.
Yeah. There you go. It's you. Stephanie made this happen.
No, not Supras.
Not 3 Supras.
But manuals, that's what I mean. Like you're the point, like you're a manual transmission buyer. You got 3 sitting there. You know, there's still fewer and fewer people know, but the people who do drive one, they love it. And if you love driving a manual, you probably like sporty cars. So to make it available in a sporty little car, duh, it makes perfect sense.
Nice that they're the like sedans and a lot of cars, a lot of the SUVs that we look at, and there's scenarios where a manual transmission isn't as fun, right? And it used to be ages ago, right? The manual transmission was the less expensive one because it was less complicated. And so, you put it in that space, and you had manual transmissions that weren't very fun. Kia Rio, Versa, there's, when you put a manual in some of the small subcompacts, it's not always fun. But it's really fun in certain environments. And it's nice to see that we do still have some in that space for however long that we do.
Yeah. And in fact, I've got a manual transmission Supra sitting in the driveway right now that I'll be talking about next week. Along with my Miata in the garage that is also a manual. So every vehicle, I've said this before, every vehicle that I've ever owned over the last almost 40 years now, that has been primarily my vehicle, has been a manual transmission, every single one. So I put my money where my mouth is.
Yeah. My very first car that I bought was not, and ever since then they have been.
Yeah. All right. Let's answer a few listener questions. We actually got quite a few this week. Thanks for everybody for sending those in to feedback@wheelbearings.media. And keep sending them in, and we'll try and get to them every week. Or, if you want to just record it like somebody did last week or the week before, we will include that audio in there as well. So first up, James Clough. I'm assuming that's how you pronounce it. It looks like, or maybe Clo. That's
I go with Clo.
One of the wonders of the English language. OUGH, depending on the word, can be pronounced any number of different ways. Anyway, James says,
James. Yeah.
Love the show. Been listening ever since you had Casey Liss as a guest in 2017. Thank you, James. Last week on the detritus of daily life, Sam spoke at some length about the BZ4X having a heat pump, not just regular air conditioning, and his expectation of more efficient cooling. I understand how reverse cycle heat pumps are game changing for heating, but what difference do they make for cooling? Generally, not a lot of difference, but they should be a little bit better. I mean, it's basically kind of like a traditional air conditioning system, but they should be a little more efficient. And Steph, just to fill you in, I had a BZ4X last time that I talked about, that as soon as I turned on the air conditioning, the range immediately dropped by 20%.
Yeah.
Which, was a fair bit more than I'm used to seeing in most EVs when I turn on the air conditioning. It's usually somewhere around 10%. Mm-hmm. And so, I would expect it to be, it's not so much that, I would expect a heat pump in and of itself to be more efficient for air conditioning, but just this overall system seemed much less efficient than what I'm used to seeing in most EVs. Because they do basically work the same way as any conventional air conditioning system. Next one is from Gigi. Anyway, just wanted to make a few remarks on some things said on the show about new Hyundai vehicles. I have a 2013 Tucson Limited that I received as a Christmas gift. Ooh,
I know, right? Like you had a bow. You have a giant red bow in your driveway. I'm jealous.
Someone had mentioned that the higher end versions of Hyundais had wireless Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. I'm not sure if we've mentioned that because I don't know of any that do. that have wireless at this point. Mine does not. I ended up getting a Motorola MA1 USB Android adapter for $60 at Target, and now get Android Auto wirelessly. It's a little slow to connect at times, but it beats having to plug into the dedicated USB port every time. So for those that aren't familiar with it, this is a little dongle that you plug into the USB port, and basically it acts as the wireless interface to your phone, and it works. I think it also works with CarPlay in addition to Android Auto, but I'm not 100% sure of that. But it definitely works with Android Auto. Secondly, Nicole mentioned that a recent Hyundai she drove didn't have a rear wiper. On mine, it looks like that as well, but it is there. They moved it from the bottom of the glass to the top now. It's hidden under the rear wing, and I can't be seen from either inside or outside the car until it moves. I too originally thought the same thing, that they didn't install one. The control is on the end of the wiper stock. So I think we may have been talking about the Ioniq 5.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember which vehicle that was, like a recent Hyundai.
But I know that I can tell you for certain the Ioniq 5 and the EV6 do not have a rear wiper.
That's what I'm thinking. 'Cause I'm like, they do not have a rear wiper. It's like, it's not.
And there's actually
hidden.
quite a few EVs that are like this, because that wiper does cause a fair bit of rear drag. And because aero is so important on EVs, they've been leaving it off on EVs, especially like on the Nissan Ariya and on the Ioniq 5, and I think on the EV6. If you look at that rear spoiler at the top of the tailgate, there's a slot in there for the air to flow through, to helps control the airflow off the back of the car. And there is no wiper, there is no rear wiper on those. You're right, the Tucson does have it mounted up underneath that, but there's no slot there either. So, and then the one thing that the Tucson is missing is motorized folding side mirrors. For nearly a $45,000 car, that's just not right. And lastly, I wanted to get your opinion on the best feature of the car. It's called auto hold. When you stop in traffic and go traffic, or waiting in line at the bank or pharmacy drive-through, it's a dream. If you're not familiar with what it does, it's like an instant e-brake. When you stop, you press in a little further on the pedal, and it engages the auto hold, so you don't have to keep your foot on the brake pedal. To disengage, just press the go pedal and resume driving. Does any other manufacturer have a similar feature, or only Hyundai?
There's auto hold on a lot of. I know I've had in other vehicles, and off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you which ones. I don't. They all work like that. Sometimes, like there's a button, and literally you push the button once, and now you have auto holds. That's like always engaged, so that if you brake, you can. It does that. So they might each work a little differently. It's pretty common on a lot
of new vehicles now.
Yeah.
If you've got an electronic parking brake, you probably got auto hold.
Yeah.
Well, actually, even on a lot of vehicles that still have a mechanical park brake, because I remember back in 2011 when I was still working at GM, when they launched the Sonic, we did a video. It had, and sometimes it's called hill hold, it's auto hold or hill hold. And that had a manual park brake. But yeah, as you said, what it's designed to do, if on most modern vehicles, it's very easy to implement, because they're just using the stability control standard on all new vehicles. And so you can apply the brake, with using the stability control, apply the brake pressure. So when the car comes to a stop, if you have hill hold or auto hold enabled, then it will just turn on the solenoid valves and isolate the pressure in the wheels to hold the brake pressure there. And you can lift your foot off the pedal, and it just stays there. It is pretty cool. Nice feature.
It is a nice feature. And the flip side, we were talking about Mazdas earlier. Mazdas, one of the things that's kind of almost annoying, they'll automatically engage the parking brake. And a lot of times when you put it in reverse, it doesn't automatically turn off. You have to push the button. Where a lot of them that automatically engage a parking brake when you stop, when you put it in gear, it'll turn it off. Or if you touch the gas, and the Mazda, you have to push the button. And several of them, and I think they might have changed that in some, but so you go to drive and you're like, oh wait, no, I can't.
Guilty.
Sorry.
Have done that. I'm like, and you get that like, woo, it's like, hold on a second, I got to turn that on.
You got to turn this off.
Yeah.
So it's a cool feature because it keeps it stable, but
it works.
My 2016 Cadillac automatically turns it off when I put it in here.
Where hill hold is actually really helpful is in a car with a manual transmission.
Yeah.
If you're driving around someplace that, got some hills, hence the name, when you're stopped, when you can take your foot off the brake, you've got the clutch pedal pressed down with your left foot, take your foot off the brake with the right, and it will hold the brakes until you give it some gas and start to release the clutch pedal. And that's that when I did the video with the Sonic in 2011, that was what we actually did. We had the car parked on a slope and put an egg behind the rear wheel, to show that it was not rolling back over that egg. So it makes it a lot easier to get launched on a hill without rolling backwards. Very, very handy feature for that.
Very handy feature.
All right. Let's see. Sean Whitehurst asked, what assistive technology do you still struggle with? I got my first rental car with the Hyundai lane check turn signal cameras. I find it distracting. I check over my shoulder and my mirrors. Do I also do a camera check? Do I drop one of the other checks? I'm a bit annoyed with this highly praised feature. Are there other features you see in cars and struggle to adapt to?
There's a lot of features you struggle to adapt to. Everything
I'm thinking which the most annoying?
But those dual cameras, I found it annoying at first, but over time, I integrate it into where my first is probably my eyes over the shoulder, right? Mm-hmm. Still old school, right? And everything else is secondary to that. But I have found that I use those more than I normally thought. But it was a process of time, being in one for a week that had it and not being in it for a while, and then like popping back up over a couple of years of being in ones that had it is when it kind of started to fade into something that added to how I check. And it doesn't replace another check. It's just another. And once you're kind of used to it being there, it doesn't take 4 seconds to look at it. It's a glance and you're just like, okay, it's there. So that's one I've gotten used to.
Yeah, I think where you said it was a rental and it probably did drive you nuts because assuming it was a rental, you didn't have it for a long time, right? So you didn't have a chance to get used to it. It does get a little bit, it becomes non-intrusive. You like when you first had lane change warnings, there was a little blinky light like on the side, like by either on your side view mirror or like on the side of the door, wherever. Those seemed kind of
blind spot monitors,
like those would bother you. Like, oh my God, there's now you don't really see them unless you should be seeing them. Like you kind of, when like I'm trying to make a lane change and am I cutting anyone off and you're paying attention to it. So I think the cameras sort of do the same thing. You get used to using them when you need to use them. You still do your visual, actually looking over your shoulder checks. But now this is like an extra, like, wait a minute, a little extra peek if you need to see it.
And they can be helpful too in more high traffic areas, or when you've got more bicyclists, when you've got more slower speed but higher traffic zones, when there's just more happening. It's a good place. When you're on the freeway, it's not necessarily as much of a use. So it is one that also is kind of, I think, driving situation specific, where it's more helpful.
Yeah, for me, it's lane departure warning and lane keep assist systems that I find are the most annoying. Because they're so inconsistent often, and sometimes they, usually they are, based on having just a single forward facing camera. A lot of times, you're driving down the road, depending on the lighting conditions, it may or may not be able to see lane markings. So sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it's too aggressive. It's just usually more annoying, and especially the ones that, and it's less of an issue now than it used to be. In the early days of those, you had a beep, if you were getting a little too close, you had an audible warning if you're getting too close to the lane marker. Now most of them use just a rumble of the steering wheel. It uses the electric power assist to vibrate the wheel a little bit. So it's less of an annoyance than it was. But yeah, those are still my main complaint.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
The ones that work badly really work badly. The ones that work well, you never notice because you're just in your lane. It's a driving style too, right? How much do you drift? So those have been, and it's interesting when we talk about Super Cruise, which we mentioned earlier, right? When you talk about autonomous driving, and I wonder if that's going to affect people's confidence in those systems when they keep getting, inaccurate or aggressive lane departure warnings when you know what you're doing, or you're not really in a dangerous situation. And are people going to say, like, look, they can't get this right. They can't get this to be intuitive. How are they going to get this to work? I have no idea if that's going to play out that way, but there may be some people who question it.
All right. Larry writes about the Cadillac Lyriq. As a longtime listener, patron, enthusiast, I look forward to each week's episode to drop. Thanks, Larry. I'm especially looking forward to hearing your remarks on the Lyriq as teased in last week's show. Since it wasn't brought up in yesterday's show, I would have to assume that your contact at Cadillac hadn't got back to you yet. I don't find that surprising, as GM seems to be tightly curating the narrative surrounding this rollout. There's been precious little information since the press event last summer. And that's, partly they've had a hard time actually building these. And we did learn during the last earnings call that apparently a big part of early on, there was a lot of software issues, but then they also had problems actually building the battery modules for these things. The supplier of the equipment was very, very late in delivering them. So they've actually had to set up manual module assembly lines in some of the assembly plants they've been able to build the cells, but then they have to manually assemble the modules, which is kind of crazy. If you do ever get to evaluate a Lyriq, one option I'm particularly interested in hearing about, no pun intended, is the noise canceling. A freakish escape room incident coupled with years of playing in a band that refused to use in-ear monitors has left me with hearing loss and tinnitus. In particular, the tire noise on certain road surfaces makes it next to impossible for me to follow a conversation. It would be interesting to hear anything about the mythical all-wheel drive version. As I understand it, the noise canceling comes with the upgraded sound system that is packaged with Super Cruise as part of the Level 2 upgrade. Since I like to drive, I don't really want Super Cruise and probably wouldn't pay $20 a month for it after the initial period. Like last week's letter, I am a deposit-paying, pre-order holding prospective Lyriq owner. Super Cruise and sound canceling were a part of the bait. I mean launch edition, but are $4,000 to $5,000 extra now. Similarly, there has been precious little information as to if and when my pre-ordered all-wheel drive will be scheduled and or built, and what the price of that car might be. At any rate, thanks for a great show. So I'm not sure that the noise canceling is only on the upper level trims. I think it's on most electrified vehicles, it's usually standard, because one of the things that they have to battle with whether it's a hybrid, plug-in hybrid, or a battery EV, when you take away the engine noise, all of a sudden a lot of other things that used to be masked by the sound of the engine become much more apparent. And so, for a long time, they've been using noise canceling to try to suppress those other sounds, road noise, wind noise, and so on. I'll have to check on where the noise canceling is available on the Lyriq. But have either of you had a chance to drive one since the launch program last year?
I had a very brief hot minute in the Lyriq and really didn't. It was like a year ago, literally. So it's been a while.
Yeah.
Same
here. I haven't been in one in a long time, but active noise cancellation is something that it gets used even more than when it's necessarily a stated option per se, because it's all the way through. So we don't have a good answer, do we?
I'll have to look into that one for next time. But I have some tinnitus, from going to too many concerts when I was younger, and listening to music way too loud. And, it's never been, the noise canceling's never been an issue for me, at least the way it's implemented in cars. So, hopefully that wouldn't be a problem for you. Eric Thatcher asks, I've noticed a lot of new electric vehicles have a glass roof. Do they also have a way to cover the glass so the sun isn't beating down on you in the summertime?
Most of them are that optic glass that goes dark.
So
it's special glass.
Yeah,
special glass.
They have UV filtering on there. And in some cases, like I believe the Lightning, and think the Rivians, they actually have a shade that you can close. So like, the Teslas don't have that. But there a number of these do have a shade that can close, to block it off completely. But they're usually, pretty darkly tinted. You're going to get a little bit more sun load than you would, with a solid roof, but it shouldn't. I've never had it really be an issue in any of these cars. And finally, from Sid Polk, hello, it's me again. At least I became a Patreon subscriber. Thank you, Sid. And thanks to everybody else that's been subscribing. We've got a few new ones recently, so thank you all. We appreciate it. So my mother-in-law in Bowling Green, Kentucky, bought a Buick from the Buick GMC Cadillac dealer there. After the local dealer here in Austin treated her poorly when she was here with her older Cadillac and needed service, I decided not to do business with them. Anywho, a while ago, I put down a $100 deposit for a Lyriq at the Bowling Green place. They contacted me a couple of months ago and said I could start the ordering process. Of course, it took a few weeks to get the link. However, I called them and told them I changed my mind and got my $100 back. I was in Bowling Green in June and stopped by the place, and they had a demo Lyriq there. I talked to the salesman who'd been handling the order, and he said that the 2024 model would have CarPlay. The decision to remove CarPlay was not finalized, and 2025 might have it, but if I really wanted it, I should order a 24. Also, the cargo area is not wide enough or deep enough to hold my baritone sax without putting a seat down. So it's a no from me. Dog, even if I... So it's a no for me, dog. Even if I get CarPlay.
Got to get the enunciation and like, no for me, dog.
It's hard to handle the punctuation when I'm reading out loud. Anyway, keep up the good work. So yeah, you mentioned earlier, Steph, that the Lyriq, at least for 24, GM, when they announced that they were dropping phone projection, they only said, for the new EVs that are being introduced, the Silverado, Blazer, Equinox, and the Escalade and the others that haven't been launched yet. Those that are already in market, for now, they're not taking it away. At some point, they might. Hopefully, for those people that already have it, they don't get an OTA update that takes away a feature that they might have been using. That would really suck.
That would create a furor. I mean, because even the cars that they're taking it away, the Google navigation and the Google built-in, the service fees for that they're going to be like free for like the first 8 years.
Yeah.
So ultimately, the long term is that you would pay to even use those services. But they built in, it feels like at this point, a long enough period to get people to get used to it and enjoy the Google built-in experience more, so that you'll be okay when in 2028 when the model year comes out and there's a fee for that. But I don't know that they're going to take it out of Lyriq or Hummer. They haven't really said they could, but in some ways it doesn't make a lot of sense to take it away from an owner who's already got it. You're really going to create more friction. If you're not giving it to somebody who buys a new car, that's a level of friction to deal with. But if you've already got it and are using it and you just take it away, you're going to have an angry customer who's not going to be like, it's cool. Google built-in is awesome. I can talk to my house. That's not going to make them happy. But if you decide to buy the car, even though it doesn't have it, then you put yourself in a different position to begin with, and you know what you're dealing with. So, we don't know for sure what they will do, but I would say it'd probably be a bad idea to take it away.
Yeah, definitely. And as far as the cargo space goes, that's something that you should always check out, for any new vehicle. It's probably never a good idea, especially if you have any particular needs or wants. You should probably never buy a vehicle sight unseen, without checking out things like that. Mm-hmm. And most importantly, of course, is the seating, which we've talked about a lot. Make sure that you drive it and, see if the seats are comfortable for you, because everybody's body is different. And some seats will be great for some drivers, and, other people will just not be able to get comfortable in those seats. So yeah, check out things like the cargo space. If you need to carry a baritone sax around, make sure that there's enough volume there for you.
Yeah.
All right. So that's it for this week. Steph, I want to thank you again for joining us.
Thanks for having me on again. It was fun. Always is.
And we'll talk to everybody next time. Bye.
Ya.
See ya.
Everyone's talking about AI these days, right? This season on Compiler, we're diving deep into how AI is reshaping the world we live in. Join us for a new season of Compiler, an original podcast from Red Hat. Subscribe now wherever you get your podcasts.
All you homeowners have unique needs. Some feel the need to paint their door a vibrant shade of blue. Others have the need to decorate their bathroom with fish, anchors, and other nautical items. And because each homeowner has unique needs, Geico helps you get the right coverage for your home and what's in it. That way, you get exactly what's right for you, even if your needs are unique. Get more with Geico.